All right. Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Amanpreet Kohli, and I am the Research and Program Coordinator with North Carolina Sea Grant. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's session. Thank you, Rebecca, for leading the session today. Rebecca is the Communications Director with North Carolina Sea Grant. So Rebecca and I work very closely on a lot of things, and Rebecca was gracious to share her time with us today and talk about presentations with purpose. So through her session today, she's going to share how do we clarify the purpose for our presentations and how do we cater our presentations to our audience. Rebecca, just for your knowledge, so the fellows here are joining us from across the Sea Grant network. They could be undergrads, they could be graduate students, interns, and the like. So it's just not people from North Carolina, but from across the network. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Rebecca, to introduce yourself and lead the session. Thank you so much.
Great. Hi, I'm Rebecca Jones, and I have a little rule. If we're under 20, I'm going to make you introduce yourself. So if you'll just, I know that we don't have a ton of time. If you'll just tell me your name and your Sea Grant and sort of your what you're working on right now. I'm going to start with you, Savannah. I see you at the top.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Savannah. I'm with North Carolina Sea and Space Grant Program, and I work on real-time control of stormwater ponds. So basically being able to remotely control them to prevent flooding and improve water quality issues.
Amazing. Thank you. Madeline Payne.
Yes, hi, I'm Madeline. I'm with North Carolina Sea Grant, and I do a lot of work in seagrass ecosystems, looking at fish communities in seagrass and also the range of seagrass species and how that changes in the broader context of climate change.
Thank you, Madeline. I read a lot of your stuff as we're editing Coast Watch, so nice to see your face. Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw Lauren Hansen. Do you mind introducing yourself? Oh, she might have just popped off. Um, Kaylee Luchansky.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm a Mountains to Sea Fellow, and I'm looking at using native zooplankton as bioremediation for harmful algal blooms in freshwater lakes in North Carolina.
Thank you. Deborah Purse. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Purse, she, her pronouns. I'm the Fellowships and Research Specialist at Washington Sea Grant, and I am a co-coordinator of this workshop series along with Aman, I see on here, and I think Becky and Asalia are on here too. So great to see everybody here today. Looking forward to the presentation.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining. Lola.
Hi everyone. For some reason, last few weeks I've been having camera issues with my laptop. So at least my photo seems to be popping up. But my name is Lola Renauer. I'm the Contaminants of Emerging Concern Graduate Assistant with South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium. So you probably see me pop around with Amon a lot with our PFAS COP if anyone is in that network. And then I'm also a fourth year PhD candidate at the University of South Carolina, where I work on freshwater skin disease on bottlenose dolphins. So kind of all contaminants in many different ways.
Cool. Bria.
Oh, I
Oh,
see she
awesome.
just put in the chat. Hi everyone, I'm Bria. My audio is not working and I am in a loud office, so I'm going to type my introduction if that's okay. I'm with Oregon Sea Grant, doing restoration impact analysis for salmon restoration projects along the northern coast. Thank you so much, Bria.
Thank you. Zara, is that how you say your name? Let me know.
Hi, I'm Zara. I am joining from Texas. I'm going to be the incoming Knaus Fellow from the Texas Sea Grant, but right now I work at the Hart Research Institute in Corpus Christi on wind tidal flat restoration work. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hansen. I'm joining from Hawaii Sea Grant, and I am a GROW Fellow, which is our state resources management fellow. And so I'm also focused on contaminants of emerging concern, similar to Lola. So just more on our state level here. Yeah, I
Awesome.
think
Thank
that's
you.
everything.
Becky. It might be that she was popping in. Elle. How about Elle?
Hi everyone, my name's Ellie Pastorius. I'm also with the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, and I work here as their marine education assistant.
Awesome. Jess.
Hi, I'm a Guy Harvey Florida Sea Grant Fellow, and I do a lot of work with fish movement, specifically marine fish movement, and I'm based at the University of Florida.
Great, thank you. Katie.
Hi, sorry, my camera's not working either, but I'm a North Carolina with North Carolina Sea Grant. I'm a STEM policy fellow at the Department of Transportation, working on climate resilient infrastructure.
Cool. Hannah.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah. I am a current California State Sea Grant Fellow, and I am working with the State Water Resources Control Board, kind of handling a lot of data management, public engagement materials, and focusing most of my work within their freshwater harmful algal bloom program. So yeah, looking forward to this.
And I want to make sure I pronounce this like Mariely, or how do you pronounce your name?
That was close. Mariely Vega.
Okay.
Great to be here and nice to meet you. I'm a NC State Policy Fellow, and I'm currently working at the State Energy Office on Western North Carolina resiliency programs.
Amazing. Thank you. And Quan Tao, can you tell me if I said that correctly?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Quan Tao, Chen Tao. Yeah, actually. I'm a PhD student in geological geological oceanography in URI GSO. Thank you.
Amazing. Great. And Becky, can you get on? I'm not sure.
Yes, hi
Good.
everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. If my name was called, Zoom kicked me off, and it looks like there might be two of me, so hopefully I can check that out. But my name is Becky Bronstein, and I'm the Resilience Fellowship Specialist with Washington Sea Grant. I support the Coastal Resilience Fellowship at Washington Sea Grant.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
And Natalie.
Were we just introducing ourselves?
Yeah, just super quick. Just like
Okay.
where are you?
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm in the NC STEM policy program, which is supported by North Carolina Sea Grant, and I'm in the North Carolina Department of Commerce.
Thank you. I think one more person, Kate Chapman. Oh, I can't hear you.
Hi, so sorry I'm late. I was coming from another meeting. Kate Chapman from South Carolina Sea Grant, Shellfish Aquaculture Research Assistant, and a concurrent graduate student at College of Charleston.
Awesome. Thank you. I wanted to say I like hearing what you're doing to make sure that what I prepped is actually going to match up, and yay, it does. So it will also help me give examples if we decide to like take another path to see what you're kind of doing. And it looks like a lot of you do different kinds of presentations, presentations at conferences, but also toward the public, so public presentations, academic presentations, a variety of kinds. So, well, I think what we're talking about today stands for both of those kinds of presentations in many ways, but I'm happy to talk about that when we get to the end. So I'm going to attempt to do all the sharing of things. May take me a minute. I am not in my optimal webinar space today. If you're at NC State, the internet's completely shut down.
Yes. And on that note, Rebecca, once you're all set up, if you still, I'll let you do the slides first and then I'll share what I was going to share.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
Are you seeing just the presentation?
Yes, just the presentation, and it looks great. If you still see the record button at the bottom on your Zoom window, if you can hit that and maybe do it save to computer, because I hit save to cloud, but I'm not sure if that will actually work given our
So
server.
I think it is recording because I see the blinking little button inside the cloud.
Okay. All right. Let's keep with that then. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I'll monitor that as well. But Rebecca, take it.
Great. So just to warn you, I will be asking questions and having you guys pop into the chat every now and then. Webinars are hard, we know that, but we will try to make it as interactive as possible. So just to give you a little bit about, isn't that nice? It's a picture from our WRI folks in our office. And someone noticed the rainwater harvester that I have pictured up here. So just to give you my background, for a long time, I was a professor in rhetoric and writing studies. And so I taught for a long time about how to do presentations, how to make arguments, all of those kind of things. And I've recently switched over for the past 2 years to working with scientists. So this particular talk focuses on designing your presentation in a way that better connects to the brains of your audience. And there are many factors to giving a good presentation, and this is just about one part of it, but I think it's a really foundational part. So as we start, I want you to conjure some images of the best and worst presentations you've experienced and just hold them in your mind. Think of those ones that just blew you away and the ones where I can't sit here anymore. Start to think about why they worked and why they didn't work. And we'll get started. Let's see if we can make our buttons move. There we go. So it's going to be one of those days. There we go. So this is a typical PowerPoint default setup. So when you start a PowerPoint presentation, this will be the default setup that you get. You offer a title or maybe a topic, and then they ask you to put in text or images or graphs. And note that the default says add a text, because that will be important later when we're talking. Defaults bias our designs and strategies for sharing information orally. So just keep that in mind. So here's the kind of slide we see at every science conference or presentation. And I made this one up. I just pulled different pieces from all different slides all over the place to make one that doesn't work very well. It has a lot of text that probably is going to mirror exactly what the person is going to plan to say. We see these kind of presentations at conferences. I see them at board meetings. I see them at policy discussions. I've been to community events. Same kind of presentation. Lots of bullets, lots of words, lots of talking. All right. I also see these kinds of slides. Up at the top, you see just a description of the data without any language to help us understand what's happening. This one happens to be from a lovely article about big data analytics from a wastewater treatment plant. So this wasn't meant to be a slide, but I see this kind of slide all the time, so I wanted to show it to you. This is a really important chart in their paper, but looking at it as an audience member, I just feel a little bit confused. So I want you to keep these things in mind as we're sort of moving along and thinking about how could you turn this into something that your audience could take home with them. Let's see. Sometimes it wants to let me move to the next slide. Okay, so this presentation is going to have two parts. The first part is a brief attempt to shift your perspective as you're planning a presentation. And the second part is going to offer science about a way to construct slides that offer a concrete alternative that might help you begin to make the shift that I hope I can convince you to make. This shift, the point of a shift like this is when you present information, I want it to stick in your audience's mind. Okay, let's start with a question. When you give a presentation, what is your purpose? And by this, I mean literally, why are you giving it? See if you can give me just in the chat a phrase or two about what you usually see yourself doing when you give a presentation. I'll give you one to start. Share information. What are the things you think you're doing when you've built this presentation, you're about to stand up in front of people? What are you doing? Awesome. Convey research, educate, take home messages, educate. Get people excited. I like that one. It's harder to get people excited than you think. Communicate big picture. Leave them with a take-home message. Oh, good. Some people have already been thinking about this. So these are some of the answers I usually get from students or when I run workshops. These are the kind of things that people say. I like translating science. That's a good one. There are many kinds of presentations and a lot of ways to get them. I was in the humanities for 25 years, and there are endlessly creative ways to share information. But I want to say that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the very kinds of presentations that you have to give at academic meetings, at a board meeting, at a conference, at the end of a graduate class. These spaces are where PowerPoint is often the primary way to transfer information from inside your brain to the brains of other people. And the default way that we do this are, Keynote, PowerPoint. Sometimes we give people handouts to think about ways to get everybody on the same page. So I've asked you to think a little bit in the chat what we were just doing to be in the position of the speaker, right? You are making a presentation and trying to decide what to share with other people. Now shift a little bit and think about your position as an audience member, because as many presentations as you've made, you've seen probably triple, 10 times as many yourself. So look at these audience members. Do you ever find yourself like them with question marks? You're looking up at the slides. There's a lot of cool, interesting things, but you're not quite following, or maybe it doesn't leave a strong impression, or you'd be really hard pressed to summarize what you learned if someone asked you. I think that's happened. You walk outside the conference door and your colleague says, "Hey, what was that about?" And you kind of stumble because you're not really sure. So here's a statement that I want to make. Even when you think you've nailed it and you've read all your notes, you've gone through the slides and you've made it on time, you might not have achieved the larger goal. And to me, this larger goal is to leave your audience with a really clear impression of your research, of the policy that you're sharing, of the science that you're trying to translate. You want them to have something to hold on to. Often the way that we conceive of science is MRAD. Anyone who's taken a science class knows introduction, method, results, and discussion. It's important. It shows you followed the science. It shows that you understand this genre of professional science writing. What I want to say here today is that just because something is really good for sharing science in the written form doesn't make it necessarily a good way to share science in an oral form. So I'll show you here. I was a teacher for a really long time, and my biggest fear is that when I'm giving a talk, people get confused. And often when you get confused, you get tired or anxious. So I just showed this piece. I taught for a lot of years, and I can't do it in the webinar like I do in my class, which would be just to go and stand right by someone who was feeling a little sleepy. But also I realized if people weren't paying attention, it was my fault and not theirs. So here's my proposition. When we're focused on sharing and presenting, right, we have something inside our brain and we just want to get all of it out and give it to the people in the audience. We don't really focus on what the audience can understand or absorb. This doesn't mean you're not thinking about them at all. It just means that our focus is usually about sharing. I have learned all this stuff. I've spent 2 years doing this research, and I really want them to understand all of it. So I'm asking you to try to shift into the audience position. When we focus on audience, we have slides that look like this. 50% of North Carolina oyster production depends on farming. It's really easy to understand. You see the oyster farm, you see the content, versus something like this. Now, this is not a real PowerPoint slide, but sometimes I feel like when I go to a PowerPoint presentation, there's so many words and things on the slide that I can't follow. Great information on this, but I don't know what the takeaway is. In the first slide, I know exactly what I'm supposed to take away with this and what I might want to do with it after I've learned that information. So, if we focus on takeaways, what do we want them to take away rather than what we want to share? We start to notice a subtle shift. If we start with takeaways, we have to think more about what our audience is capable of absorbing. Even at a science conference, audiences have a mix of backgrounds, educations, levels, and disciplines. When we speak to lay audiences or mixed discipline audiences, this is even more important. Sometimes what they can absorb about is really about content, like it's really complex content. And so you have to put it into chunks. And I just want to say, please don't say dumb it down, because I don't think that's what we're doing. That's for another talk altogether. But they might need chunks because it's complex. Sometimes they can't absorb because it's such a large amount of information. And sometimes it's just they can't absorb all the connections that you want to make between different things. Because often when we're explaining science, we're explaining a process, and we want to make sure that our audience understands process and not just the sort of end result. So I'm going to ask you to talk with me a little bit more again. If you had if you got exactly what you wanted at the end of a talk, what are your big dreams for your audience after you finish up? Do you want them to clap and cheer? Do you want them to start a movement? What are some of the things that you dream of if you gave the best talk ever? And you can post those up in the chat. Yes, practice it. So I've got here, you just want them to understand the idea, and by the end, the best possible, and especially the kind of science that Sea Grant does, is we want people to do something, right? If you do water quality work, maybe you want them to stop using fertilizer near a river, right? Or you want them to go eat a certain kind of seafood. Let's see. They want people to use the stormwater device. You want them to do something. You want them to remember and take some kind of action. So these are amazing things that you're putting in the chat. So what I'm saying here, that is the hardest thing to do, right? Change behavior. There are books and books and books on how do you change someone's behavior. So what I want to talk about today is that before you can even get to that really hard behavior change, you have to make sure they can even follow what you are saying. So we're starting at the beginning to make sure that when we get to the more advanced kind of public communication, that they're ready to move along with you, like my little running man on the slide. So one thing that I want you to do, I sent out an email via Aman to just have a kind of PowerPoint in mind. So if you have that, just make sure it's somewhere on your computer with easy access so that you can take a look at it. And think again when you're looking at your particular presentation rather than your dream, right? So we had our dream. Our dream presentation is that we're so good that everyone changes their ways and there's no more climate change, right? So instead, I want you to look at the presentation that you have in front of you and think about what was your goal when you were making this presentation. And I want to be just really realistic. Sometimes your goal is just to get through the material without stumbling. Finish your presentation in allotted time. I know that when I first started making presentations, the primary reason I used PowerPoint is just to keep myself organized. Because I didn't want to just chat away the time and never get to the end of my talk, right? I think we see that happen a lot at conferences. So if you have, that's usually a goal that's about you. Think a little bit about an audience goal. So I'll give you an example. In a couple weeks, am giving a talk for the Erosion and Sediment Control Workshop. And my title is Lost in Translation, Being Clear When the Message is Confusing. And I was invited to talk because the person in charge of the workshop had been hearing that a lot of people were frustrated that they would give people policy information and they didn't follow it, or they would share handouts or tell a contract or something and they didn't follow any of that information. So she wanted me to talk to them about it. So my background is in public communication. It's a 2,000-year-old science. Aristotle started writing about it in 400 AD. So there's a lot to say about being clear, right? And but I have to realize I'm not giving a graduate lecture on how to be clear. What I'm doing is something that is for this specific audience. So what I want them to take away is a thing that they could do tomorrow to be clearer. So I want everyone to have one thing that they can hold on to and take away. I want them to be curious about other ways that they might implement after they implement number one. So it's going to be a very different kind of presentation than one I might give to my graduate students or to other folks in the humanities that are interested in Aristotle or rhetoric or that long history of communication. So for the next 5 or 8 minutes, I want to talk to you about this specific piece of research. And you can see here, this is an open source book, and I'm happy to share this with you. I'll send it to Aman so you can have access to it. Sorry. Went in the other direction. Apologies. And I want this particular piece of research begins by giving general information about PowerPoint presentations, and then goes into a very specific research project that studied how to get students to actually follow the science driven presentation practices. I'm specifically going to talk about Joanna Wolf. She's at Carnegie Mellon, and she probably has 100 papers on best practices in communication that are all backed by her own studies. And so I'm highlighting her because I also am going to show you some of her slides, and I've done a couple of workshops with her. She gave an excellent workshop on how to do better focus groups. So if you like this piece, she has a lot of great work, so I wanted to highlight her name so you could follow her. Most of her work is open source, so you are welcome to read it for free. So here's the problem with PowerPoints. The defaults are ineffective. We know that everyone complains about PowerPoints. I'm not even going to ask you to post that up. I think I'm not sure if you know this, but there are several major companies that have banned PowerPoint presentations. You're not allowed to give them anymore because they don't work. You know, they're boring. They have too much text. They're too long. All of those complaints that we all know about for PowerPoint presentations. So here's the solution that Joanna Wolf follows in her experiment, and that for the past, it's about 10 or 15 years, a lot of folks in writing centers and communication centers have been trying to get students, especially science students, to follow. It's the assertion evidence model and the reason it's good is it works better with the way human brains function. So the assertion evidence model of slide design takes advantages of the principles of cognitive theory of multimedia learning. So most notably, it follows the dual coding principle. So stick with me for a minute. I'm going to babble, and then I'll show you some pictures that will make this a little bit easier. But the dual code model says this: visual inputs and verbal inputs follow different channels in our brain. So when we offer a presentation that kicks on both the verbal and the visual, we tend to get better knowledge creation. What happens in PowerPoint slides often is that there's a bunch of text on the slide and then someone's talking, and that gets the same verbal channel. And so the channel gets sort of crowded, and we're either reading the slide or listening to the talk, and so we're not getting all of the information. So this is a picture. Our brains do better at processing complex information when we drive on both of these roads, when we offer visual and verbal information. In a PowerPoint presentation that has too much text on it or all visual, we're driving our car down just one side of the lane. And so, yes, we're going to get something into people's brains, but we're not going to hit that sort of sweet spot where we're creating knowledge. That's the theory. So let's go back to this slide. When a slide like this comes up, the first thing I'm doing, I'm a reader, I'm reading the slide. And so cognitive models say it's very hard for us to read and listen at the same time. And so what's happening is I'm either not really reading what's on the slide or I'm listening to what the person says. And so I'm missing something and there's a gap in between. So let's take a look at a different way of doing this slide. This version of the slide, first of all, for all my science folks out here, I know that this is not the same stream. So you can write in the chat how frustrated you are that I couldn't find the exact same stream. So sorry about that. I was just showing you a model of what you might do to give a visualization of what it means that toxic algal blooms are ephemeral. Sometimes that is a word that we know, but we're not sure about. And so when you're using words like that, you want to give a visualization of them. So this is one way to visualize that very particular issue, that because they are ephemeral, they're hard to study because you have to go run out there and test the water. You may not live close by. You don't get the beginning of the bloom and the end of the bloom just because you're not there. So this is the kind of slide that follows the AE model. You have a sentence at the top, and at the bottom, you have a visualization. So I'm going to give you, when I emailed Joanna about her new publication, this publication came out about a month ago. She gave me a set of slides that she uses in a workshop. So I want to give you another example and let you know that I'm giving you multiple examples of the same thing because it's sometimes kind of hard to get things in your brain without a little bit of repetition. So just bear with me. I'm sure we've all seen these kinds of slides, right? This is a summative slide that essentially gives all of the information that you want to share. What you learned in your study was that there are multiple ways to achieve workplace efficiency. So you decided to put all of those things on one slide to make sure you're covering all the bases. So Joanna first shows you how to reduce this and make it a little clearer. So the next stage of clarity would be to at least put the three primary ways to work more efficiently into blocks. You'll also notice that at the top of the page now, we have a clear declarative sentence. To work efficiently, do this. So this gives you a conclusion that you can hold on to, and now you know if you want to work efficiently, you have to break up your time. So here's an even clearer way to do it. You don't need the text underneath. You're highlighting the word blocks so that people understand what you're referring to, and you can sort of talk through what chunk time, schedule, and reflect actually mean. Finally, she offers the ultimate way of doing it. This pairs up a statement of fact about what they learned in their study with a visualization. And now this sticks in your brain. You can see yourself working, you can see yourself stretching. You can see yourself reflecting after your blocks of time, although I'm not sure we all reflect like this anymore. And finally, you can imagine yourself alternating sitting, walking, and standing. It's not that these concepts are difficult, it's just that now, because you visualize it, it has a higher chance of staying in your brain. So let's go back to that original slide, and you can see what a difference it is to have all of these words that you're trying to process, read, listen to the speaker talk through it, versus if you've got that clear visualization and a declarative statement, how you can remember what you were supposed to learn from the study. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm headed toward Joanna's actual study, but I want to give you a little bit more summary about what several pieces of research over the past decade, 15 to 10 years, that researchers in technical communication, communications in general, even science communications have learned about using the AE method. Students who are taught this method actually do better on their exams. So when a professor adopts this model, when they're presenting their PowerPoints, the students retain more information and they do better on their exams. Also, when the students themselves are surveyed, the students prefer this model, even in any kind of presentation, even outside of a class. So it works to help people retain information, and most people prefer it. We also know that the assertion evidence model is something that the audience perceives that the speaker is actually better at speaking and offering clearer information. So when this model was used versus another model, audience were surveyed, and most of them picked the AE model speaker as the person who was better at giving a presentation, and they were better able to comprehend the material. Unfortunately, here's the rub. The AE model is harder and it takes a lot more work. So Joanna did several experiments with students at the Carnegie Mellon, I think it's the Global Communication Center, and this is where most of her studies come from. She knew that audiences and students like the model better. They learn more from the model. She also knew that audiences think people who use the model offer stronger, clearer presentations. The problem was that they couldn't get the students to actually use the model, even if they've been through workshops, even if they've seen it and appreciated it more. So her paper is actually about developing a workshop to try to move students from appreciating the model to actually using the model themselves. So you can see here, even though people like it, there's only a few superstars that actually use it. So one of the reasons that people don't adopt things that they know are better is basically just habit. Habit is a really powerful force, and so is convention. There are dozens of proven ways to share information, but we often follow convention because we want to fit in with groups. We want to fit in with our professional societies. We want to fit in with our workplace. We want to fit in with our graduate programs. And these things often form habits, and habits are really difficult to break, especially when you're doing something that makes you nervous, like give a public presentation. So Joanna's research and her colleagues found 3 reasons why students don't adopt the new method, even though they know it's better. Number 1 is it's more work. We often see our projects as having many connected, complicated parts. And at the end, it's really hard to break them back down into chunks and to tell a story of the process rather than really trying to help the audience conceptualize the final project, when what we need to do is go back to the beginning and remember how we learned about it and take your audience through the process. The second reason that they don't adopt is that the presenter has to summarize the main idea in the sentence at the top. Summary seems really easy. My biggest fear is that people will quit learning to summarize when they are using chatbots, because summarizing is actually a cognitive ability that has to be trained and learned. It's one of the things that I did even in my advanced writing classes, is forcing students to take difficult material and turn it into one sentence. We all know this is hard because I don't know about you, but when someone says, "Give me the elevator pitch," I get a little nervous and maybe even kind of sweaty because we know we have this huge project in our brains and we love every part of that project. And it's really feels like a disservice to the project to turn it into one sentence or a 1 minute chat. But this is what we're asking people to do on pretty much every slide. So this is not something that's really easy to do. And finally, with this model, you have to create notes and practice. You can't rely on the slides themselves to give your talk because there shouldn't be a ton of text on the slides. And we know this, people read from their slides. I see often I'm in a conference and they can't see the screen on the computer. And so they actually look up at the giant screen to understand what they're doing. So this requires you adding notes to your slides, assuring that you can see the notes and project the presentation at the same time. It also means you've got to practice a little bit. And if you don't have those notes, you're going to have some way of presenting, which I know sounds a little bit terrifying. So just to let you know what happened with Joanna's experiment is it did work. They created a new kind of workshop that forced participants to use the model and engage it in several ways. What they did is create, like the video that I handed you, they created some high quality videos that they asked students to watch. They gave them homework assignments. When they were actually in the workshop, they first did examples, but the bulk of the workshop had the students take their own research and turn it into an AE model slide. So right there together with help, surrounded by their peers. They actually did the process all together. They were given immediate feedback from the people in the workshop. And they also were in a class where all the people were switching over to this model. So it felt a little more comfortable. And there was a kind of reverse peer pressure where you weren't feeling pressured to do the old style model, but you were feeling pressure to do the new style model. So what I'm asking you right now is to open up your PowerPoint presentation, take a look at it. Or, if you don't have one open, grab the first one that pops in, see recent PowerPoints that you have in your Microsoft PowerPoint application. Choose a slide that's really dense with text and information, and maybe it's complex. Maybe you have one slide that just has a graph or a chart, and take about 2 minutes and just decide what could you do using the assertion evidence model to make it easier for your audience to grasp this one slide. I'm not talking about the whole talk. I'm talking about just one slide. What could you do to make an audience member walk out the door and actually remember that particular point? Someone asked them, they could say, this is what I learned in this talk. And this might mean breaking it into several slides. It might mean writing an assertion and leaving the visual that you already have on the slide. It could mean a lot of things. So I want you just to think for a minute and then just post in the chat what you could do to make your slide better. And then I'll shut this down and we can talk for the rest of the time. I like the word synthesize that Becky offers. In some of my advanced writing classes, we would spend a week on summary and then a week on synthesis, which are really different brain activities and different kinds of writing that you have to do. Summarize takes one thing and makes it smaller. Synthesize takes many things and weaves them together in a way that other people can understand. And they sound great, but it's really hard to do sometimes, especially when you're doing really complex work, and a lot of you listed really complex work that you're doing in your graduate schools or your projects or your fellowship. I like the method slide idea to have a picture doing each step. As a person who is not a scientist, that's my dream because I always want to ask, they talk about all the fish. I went to all these things with fish, and my question is, so did you scoop them in a net? Did you swim with them? Like, I don't know, right? Because I'm not a fish scientist. And every presentation I go to, I just want to ask, like, how did you, it's about slugs. Did you grab the slugs? Did you look at them? Did you lay on the ground? I don't know. Oh, I think, Natalie, that's really interesting that it was fine to do your own work, but when you're having to do other people's summaries, that becomes more difficult. Am I right on that?
Yeah,
You
I
guys are
think it was just the level at which I knew the science in graduate school that I could easily summarize it. And like, I was doing this method in graduate school. It was a lot easier then than it is with my work I do now.
Oh, that's super interesting. And it is very difficult if you're doing, I think some of the STEM policy folks might be doing work that is unfamiliar to them, which is really interesting. And it requires a lot of research to do those kind of things. Um, oh, Madeline, great. This seems like a lot of people are thinking about methodology slides. That might be an interesting talk. I'd have to think about it. Maybe one of you can do it.
Yeah, and I'll pitch in. So my current methodology slides, I gave a talk last week actually at a conference.
Okay.
And I do have the pictures because I agree, like showing if you've got pictures like in the field, especially, I think that's, picture says 1,000 words. But looking back at the slides, I still feel compelled, I think, to add some like bullet text. And so definitely finding the balance there, especially with methodologies that, sometimes it is really important to state or make sure it's communicated. If you're looking at certain parameters or what you're collecting and things like that. So how to balance the visuals with some of the information that, you're worried might get lost, and just if you only talk about it and you don't have anything on the slide to actually clearly state. So yeah.
Yes, because you also have to be accurate, right? And you don't want people to mistake what you're saying for something else. Hannah.
Yeah, I had a question. This was going to be like the comment I also threw in the chat. But I am currently working in a space where we have like standardized PowerPoint slides that we have to use like with the agency name and stuff. And they're often recorded to be shared online afterwards. So I find that people who make them are filling them with a lot of text, assuming that people aren't gonna listen to the recording, but just look at the slides. But then you get these really like text dense PowerPoint slides. So that's kind of the like curiosity and challenge that I'm having now of how to create those slides for the like post accessibility world, but also keep it with pictures and engaging for the folks that like attend live.
Yeah, I think that's really hard. And, some of this has been going on for a long time, but some of it's post-COVID, is when people expect, used to when if you miss the webinar, just miss the webinar. You don't get the slides, and it made people go to things. So I had a colleague that was really sort of committed to visual slides, and they didn't have very much text on their slides ever at all. And what they did is supplied a paper afterwards. And so they wrote up their paper, and for every presentation that was readily available. And that's what they've been asking to do at a lot of humanities conferences, is that you have to post this kind of paper. I know that seems like a lot of work to these kind of pieces, but it was what you were planning to say, right? And that was just posted along with the presentation so that anybody else, if you're presenting, I think a lot of this is easier if you're presenting on a published piece. That's easy, right? You just say, if you want the details, go here, and you don't have to worry about it. The government pre-made slides, I think, are probably the biggest challenge, right? Because a lot of people use them as a sort of white paper, right? And instead of a real white paper, which is what they should, like if you're not going to come to this talk, just read the white paper, right? Because it's going to have all the details and all the pieces. Like this isn't meant to be a white paper. And it's really too bad that we've shifted that way toward making PowerPoints into something that a person wants to read, because I don't want to read PowerPoint slides. I don't know about you. They take up too much space and you're having to scroll through all the stuff. So the thing is, you guys are all young and lively, and as you get in charge of things, just be like, this is not what we're doing anymore. We're going to make nice slides and a nice presentation. And if you couldn't come to the presentation, here's a document that is actually easier to read than the PowerPoint slides. I think that's the issue, right? Is it's actually really hard to read PowerPoint slides because they're filled with all kinds of weird pictures that don't download correctly, and they take up a lot of ink. So I don't know, does anyone else have another solution to that sort of the pre-made slide thing?
Yeah, maybe like also being able to supply them with the transcript too, because I feel like a lot of times like Zoom like auto creates a transcript. Now, obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it'd be a lot easier to start off with that and just like kind of scanning to see if it like messed up any sciencey words. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like you kind of just gotta watch the recording, or yeah, or making a paper. So
I've done this only a couple times, but I've made two separate versions because I start with the more detailed one, like a draft where I have everything I want to convey, and then I polish that, and then I make a shorter version out of that, which is basically a headline and a picture to go with it. So I present the shorter one, but then to share online, I actually post the other one. It's a lot more work, so I don't recommend doing that, but
Yes, I've done that before too, given a detailed one to anyone who wasn't able to attend. And let's be realistic, are people really reading those? I'm just being a little cynical about it, but I mean sometimes they do. But and the one person that needs to read it, and you should have it available. Now we're in a world where you have to make it available in multiple forms. And so actually doing a presentation requires a lot more work overall. It needs to be accessible. Lots of people need to be able to see it and read it. And so maybe we do fewer presentations, but make them really good. I still think even the government version ones, you could still at least put a topic sentence at the top rather than just a phrase. So it's the difference between here's a topic and here's what I'm actually saying. That's an easier thing to do, but it's hard, especially when they're just like only use a few slides. Yes, alt text is important, and content to the notes. And so, often when I get the PowerPoint slides, I don't see the people's notes. And so that's another way to do it as well, is to make those notes accessible. It also means you need to edit your notes and not just have like these notes, right? It's been a rough week, so I have some crazy stuff in the notes that I'd want to edit before I shared it with anybody. But you can do that as well. You could write notes. I actually have the citations for Joanna's work in there, those kind of things that you could do. So that's an alternative. If you wanted to make it shorter, you could say the slides are available with my notes. So that might be the easiest way to deal with the government part of it. Oh, good. Hannah just says adding the notes is a good idea. Just be sure to edit them. I don't know about you. It's sort of hard to see them sometimes, and there's a lot of spelling errors, weird things in there, and reminders and that kind of stuff.
I have a question, like considering in the context of mostly academic conferences, if we were presenting actually a poster instead of giving an oral presentation, what would your suggestions be for applying the same type of methodology? Mostly because I've seen, again, I was just at a conference last week. Some posters were great to look at, but there's still a lot where it's just like paragraphs of text, and I feel like there has to be a better way for a poster presentation than just, writing out these blocks of text. But obviously it's different than the slide format. You're working with limited space.
Yes, I'm also happy. I will send, if Aman, if you will remind me, there's a great NPR article about, there was a group of scientists that came up with a better way that really follows this model in some ways. I don't think they said they were following this model of doing posters. It was fabulous. I was super excited. I thought it's on NPR, it's going to take off, and it didn't. And I think it didn't for the same reasons that Joanna said, is because it's harder. Now, what they did was they made a very simple poster with just, key points, not all the data, because let's face it, you can't see those charts. I mean, I bring my glasses and I stand really close to the poster, but I can't read the chart, right? It's too small. So they have a QR code that goes to a paper, and it might be their class paper that they did, or actually the actual article piece. And so I thought it was fabulous. I've only seen one so far, and I've just been to all the conferences that I've been going to here. I went to a AAAS one out on the out in Washington State, and there seem to be more of them there than I've seen back on the East Coast. So I don't know if there's some professor out in Washington State or California that's making the students do it. But I would be all for simpler posters, because I think what you really want to do is start a conversation, right? And when it's so hard to look at it, all our pictures that Dan, our photographer, takes at the conference are people leaning really close with their glasses on, trying to read the poster. And it would be nice if it was just more of a conversation. That's a great question, and I will find that article, because it's a nice little video of the student who was super excited to follow it and hoped it would be this new trend that I don't think happened.
Well, I want to be mindful of everybody's time. We're at the top of the hour. But thank you so much, Rebecca, for this great presentation. And thank you, everybody, for participating. It was very informative and engaging. So thanks again to both our speakers as well as our attendees. I've put my email in the chat if you wish to reach out to me and connect directly with Rebecca. I'm happy to facilitate that. I've also put a link to our past recordings. Hopefully this one will also record and the server would not crash and actually post the recording. So I'll share this